to say a few things. We were already talking. The conversation started getting interesting, so we just wanted to start. Everybody knows I don't have an introduction for this. I'm Thomas. I've got an amazing guest on today that I'm really excited to talk to. We were just saying there, just before we came on, Clara is my fourth psychologist. I had Justine, who I actually met through Clara. And that was it the post-lockdown research that she'd done?
I think so. I've taken part. I'm one of those people who always takes part in research because I think it's interesting. So I always say yes and I sign up and I'm like, okay, cool. So I think I must have done at least 5 or 6 research projects in the last 2 years, kind of in a similar format or, similar area. So I'm not 100% sure. So sorry, Justine.
No, I think it was, but she ended up changing it. So there was Justine, who was first. Dr. Fraser Smith. He actually done a TEDx talking about like the male identity crisis. That was brilliant. And then she's still not been up yet, but she's in the process of becoming a doctor, and her name's Gillian Horbine.
Oh, right, okay.
So she does educational psychology in Dundee, I believe. But right.
Yeah, he is the main place for it.
So that we were talking already. Mm-hmm. Clara, I need you to introduce yourself to everybody. I'm really excited for this conversation because I have bumped into you. I was at this competition at the same time as you. I seen you on stage, but I didn't see you before or after. Mm-hmm. I've followed you since, like, as soon as you came on VW Physique. Mm-hmm. And I've loved your content since, since as soon as I started following you. So, if you could give us a little bit about yourself, we're just going to talk.
Okay. So, as you said, my name is Clara. I'm a sport and exercise psychologist in training, but I specialize in exercise psychology. And what that means, kind of being in training, just means that I've completed my undergrad in psychology and a master's in sport and exercise psychology. And I'm currently in the process of just doing like my applied side of work. And it just means that I work under supervision essentially. But alongside that, I've built my career focused on the fitness industry. So I came into the fitness industry kind of by accident, where I knew I wanted to become an exercise psychologist from the moment I went to uni. So I moved to Scotland from the south of France, north of Spain, went to Dundee to uni, and I could see the uni gym from my halls. And I was like, new life, new me, I'm going to start going to the gym. And basically I realized that exercise was having a really positive impact on my mental health. Initially, I thought I wanted to become a clinical psychologist, but very quickly the link between exercise and mental health, and also the link between morbid obesity and kind of mental health history just became so apparent to me that I became obsessed with exercise psychology 10 years ago now. And wow. I kind of fell into the fitness industry because I thought, well, if I want to be the best exercise psychologist I can be, I should probably get my PT qualification. I should probably become a fitness instructor because that kind of makes sense. And my history in sport, well, I hate sport. I've never been into sport.
Hang on, Clara, you've cut off.
Oh, no.
One second. You cut off from, it makes sense.
Oh, I don't even know what I was saying there.
It just cut off for like 5 seconds there. It just froze.
What was I talking about? I was just harping on about how I was never into sport, but I got into exercise by going to the gym at uni and kind of seeing the link between exercise and mental health essentially, and then like obesity and how people with severe obesity had always had like a history of poor mental health, or like there was always a story explaining their life. So that completely fascinated me, and that was it. I was saying that it made sense for me to get into the fitness industry and get qualifications in there because I figured that would make me a better exercise psychologist. What I never really anticipated was coming into the bodybuilding world, and sort of very soon after I started working as a Zumba instructor, I reached out to Yvonne, who's still now my coach, to prep for a photo shoot ahead of going away to Loughborough to do my masters, because I was being vain and I was like, well, Loughborough is the best place for sport in the UK, so I want to be in the best shape of my life, so I'm going to do a fitness photo shoot. And kind of that led me to start bodybuilding, to come into that. I competed for the first time, loved it, completely fell in love with it. finished my qualifications, and once I'd graduated from my master's, I was still working in a gym, and Vaughan approached me and he was like, oh, do you want to, be a female coach under the VW Physique brand? And I jumped at the opportunity because I didn't know what the hell I was doing after my master's. I knew I wanted to become an exercise psychologist. I worked in the fitness industry, but I had no kind of plan of action. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. And I was working in a gym doing a weight loss intervention. I started, putting things in place to work with Vaughan. I got a job in my local council at the time to work in exercise referral. And this is January 2020. We all know what happened a couple of months later. And a lot of my applied psychology career then got halted because of the pandemic, because I wasn't able to formally enroll in this second stage of my career, which kind of formally qualifies me and kind of allows me to register as a psychologist at the end of it. But it was a blessing in disguise, because it meant I got to work in the fitness industry as a coach while slowly acquiring more knowledge. And then by the time I was enrolled, I had built so many networks in the industry. So it's almost like, it sounds weird to say out loud, but I had a voice of authority when it came to psychology and the fitness industry, even though, I hadn't really started off yet. And that's then enabled me to, over time, I'm 2 years into my qualification out of 4, but it's allowed me over time to really see how psychology, exercise psychology, and the fitness industry kind of fully intersect. And that's kind of what is my main, I don't say obsession, but kind of my main obsession. It's what I'm most passionate about.
Yeah, that's so cool. Do you know, the thing is, there's a bunch of things that I really want to talk about. A lot of it's just going to be, I would say I'm someone that just kind of has educated opinions on a lot of things. I don't have when I was at uni, I was never great at retaining information. I was never great at
Right.
citing studies in debates. I was pretty crap at it, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah.
The way my mind always works is I would get information and I would automatically just try and turn it into a practical. I would be right, okay,
Right.
would that slot in then to... And I'm going to call someone out right now. I had a lecturer, right? She's the greatest woman I've ever met in my life, though. Genuinely. I'll tell you a quick story, then I'll go on to her.
Go for it.
Second day of being at uni, she wrote an equation on the board, and I stood up and I was like, look, I'm just going to go because I have no clue what that means, and I'm not going to probably be able to do it. And she was like,
Right.
you will be able to do it, but it just might take you a little bit longer than everybody else. And that stuck with me, and that is a quote that I live by. But that same woman, I said I wanted to do my dissertation on. I don't know if you've ever heard of post-activation potentiation.
Somewhere in my brain, maybe.
Yeah. So what it is it's what you do is you overload the muscles.
Right.
You overload the muscle so it thinks that it's going to lift a certain amount of weight. So it then puts in that amount of effort with a lighter weight, and you pretty much throw it.
Right.
A sprinter done it and broke a world record. He did a back squat and then sprinted. The results last up to half an hour. So I said to her, if the results last up to half an hour, can we look at endurance running within that time period? Because if there's a increase in energy output or force output, maybe someone could run further. And she was like, no, that's stupid. And then 2 years ago, the NSCA, who are the biggest thing in strength and conditioning, they published saying that post-activation potentiation, or PAP, is gold dust in the endurance industry. So that's how my brain works.
You're visionary.
It pieces things together. But this is what I was going to say. That when I was at uni, I actually also wanted to do a dissertation on anxiety.
Right.
And this is maybe something we'll just quickly talk about. I've gone off on a tangent. There was another reason I was telling you that story, but it'll come back to me. I wanted to look at the difference between anxiety for a professional football player taking a penalty, and then the anxiety for say a professional snowboarder trying to do the newest triple backflip. Because there's no danger with taking a penalty. Is there a different level or a different kind of anxiety, or does the body respond differently to it?
I don't know. I actually don't have an answer for that, but that's a really good question. I think the difference in activation in the body probably isn't that different, because it's more about how we appraise it and how we appraise the consequences of it. So while taking a penalty might not be physically dangerous, the consequences of missing might be so threatening to someone's sense of identity or their self-esteem or their team, or like it might be so consequential that it might not be distinguished at all by something that, you know, might seem really physically dangerous, but actually it's a calculated risk that a snowboarder is taking because they've done it so many times. Like if I try to do a triple backflip, that would be, you know, of course that'd be so dangerous. Like I'd be shitting myself. Can I swear, by the way? Is that okay? Can I swear on the podcast?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So I don't know if there would be a difference physiologically. You know, there might. I don't know. That's a really interesting question. You've got me thinking now.
But that's kind of just how my brain works, and I think that's why I wasn't very good at uni. I wasn't good at just like pulling together, right, this is all the data, this is what it is, end of. I was always like, so this could then tie into this, and then that would help with that, and it was just like, they were constantly like, stop trying to solve problems, Thomas, just tell us what the data says. And I was like, oh well.
Boring.
Yeah, to me it kind of was. But right, let's not talk about me, because it's not about me, it's about you. So, with regards to coaching, you now are, I don't know if it would be the complete opposite end of the spectrum from coaching Zumba to now being the kind of coaching you do. Would you be able to, could you talk us kind of through in a little bit more detail, like how that journey kind of got where it is now? I know you said Vaughn approached you, but there was surely classes and there was...
Oh, there's so much that happened. I mean, the journey, I guess, is a little bit more nuanced. So, I mean, do you want the long version? Because it's long. It's a bit messy.
Do it. We've got loads of time, all the time in the world.
Okay. So, right, I've been a dancer my entire life, competed in dancing, but never really been interested in sport. And in my second year of uni, I signed up to go to America to do like Camp America. And I signed up to go as a dance teacher. And I was accepted and I went away. And it was amazing. And while I was out there, one of the other counselors was like, could you teach Zumba? And I was like, never taught Zumba in my life. But yeah, fuck it, why not? Like I've been to classes on that. So I was like, you know, can't be that hard. And I loved it. The kids loved it. The other counselors loved it. It was such a great laugh. And I was like, oh, maybe there's something in here. Didn't think much of it. And then the following summer, I went to volunteer in Cambodia while, like, in midterm, like in the summer term, while I was off uni. And I ended up also somehow just landed myself in a way where in the mornings we would go to the schools with the young kids and I'd be teaching Zumba there. And I was like, right, well, I clearly seem to enjoy this thing. And so when I finished uni, the first thing I did was, you know, get my Zumba qualification. The back kind of story in there a little bit was that while I was at uni, I really, really struggled with disordered eating. I've got a history of like body dysmorphia, body dissatisfaction, tendency towards perfectionism. I am a perfectionist, full stop. I now say I'm a perfectionist in recovery, but I am definitely a perfectionist. And it kind of all came to a head in uni. I was really struggling with binge restrict cycles. And after I had graduated from my undergrad, I ran my first kind of race. And I ran it for BEAT, so the Beat Eating Disorders charity, which is ironic because I was struggling with eating disorders, but maybe not so ironic. And kind of around the same time, I started teaching Zumba. And what I was noticing is that the message that I was trying to put forward for my Zumba ladies, as I call them, was one of like self-love, like body appreciation for movement, for ability to sweat, to have fun with movement. And then I was going away and not practicing any of that myself, and it just felt really incongruent. And that kind of essentially was a kick up the arse for me to start working on that. And I was lucky that at the time I had a job in a mental health practice, just doing admin, but I was surrounded by psychologists that were like, oh, Clara, can you send this client like this worksheet on whatever? And so I got to see everything that these psychologists were using, and I just used it on myself. I just spent all my free time. I would print all the worksheets and I'd do them all in my free time. do the cognitive behavioral therapy, the changing your thoughts, the write down how you feel about yourself, all that stuff. And that allowed me to start talking about it. And then I reached out to Vaughan and said, I want to work on a photo shoot. And I kind of felt like I was in a good enough place to just give someone else control, because so much of what was consuming my mind was trying to make decisions around food and getting stuck in the I'm going to restrict, but then I end up binging, and then I end up feeling like shit, and then I binge again, and then I restrict again. And so that was a really empowering kind of first step. So kind of the Zumba teaching started, then that progressed to exercise to music teaching and kind of group instructing, while working with Vaughan, upskilling myself in kind of my own training abilities and on all that. And then I competed for the first time and did a photo shoot, finished my PT qualification around about the same time. And that then kind of, just kept going. And sort of that's how it morphed into how I coach now, which is, well, it started off very similar to the way that Vaughan coached, because that's kind of all I knew. But over time, it's progressed to be more aligned with, I guess, like with who I am and with my psychology skills. Like it just, slowly coming together, as opposed to being two separate things. And I guess almost in a motto way, like what I do is I help people develop the mindset they need to get the results that they want. So my coaching is very focused on not just making sure that people are training and like eating whatever they need to do to get to their goals. It's very much focused on picking up on people's language and picking up on how people feel about themselves, and using the coaching space to work through some of those common sticking points that very often people are too ashamed to talk about. And so ideally what I try to do is I try to create a safe space within the coaching environment that people, or that my clients feel that they can then trust me to share that, and that then that can be part of the work that we do. Because training and nutrition, I mean, it's not easy, but it's relatively simple. But it's the nitty gritty stuff that does take a lot more time. And my goal for my clients, what I always tell them in consult calls, is that I want to make myself redundant. Like eventually, unless you really like me and you want to be with me forever, like my goal is to make myself redundant. But to do that, it's not enough that you know about macros and calories and training principles and recovery. It's important that you know, why do you keep falling off the bandwagon? Why do you believe that you're not deserving of going to the gym? Why is it that you go from one extreme to the other? Why is it that you lack sustained motivation towards your goals, amongst other things? And that's the work that I try to integrate into the actual coaching process that can then enable them to, move forward, develop, flourish, feel amazing, and, have the skills, like the actual psychological skills that can then enable them to keep going forward, without the need to work with a coach anymore, unless they want to, of course.
Yeah. So I actually look back on your Instagram. I do this to everybody that I get to come on. Your first gym post was in October 2015.
Oh my God, you've definitely gone all the way back. Is it a lat pull down pose?
Yeah, it is. It's a lat pull down pose. That's funny. Yeah. So I looked back. Is that about the time? So how long have you been working with Vaughan now?
I've been working with Vaughan, it will be 5 years this year. So I started with him in January 2018. And I started going to the gym in September 2013 when I moved to Dundee. But I mean, it was very much, I would go in, don't know what the hell I was doing. I loved it. I loved being there. I'd spend like 2 hours plus in the gym. Not a fucking clue what was happening, but I just so enjoyed being there. Like I would go, I'd do all the machines. I wouldn't count reps. I'd put specific songs on for different machines. And I'd be like, right, that's the machine that I do this song to. So like, that's how long I'm on there for. And I actually remember, God, this is like, I can't believe that you've unlocked a memory. I remember once this guy came over to me and he was like, how many sets do you have left? And I was so petrified, I just got up and left. I was like, I don't even know what he's talking about. I just left the gym.
I'm done with it.
But yeah, I just really did. But it wasn't, I mean, I was consistent in the way that like, I would go to the gym when like my friends said that they would go and I didn't. So you're cracking up. But yeah, like I was consistent in that way. And like, that's maybe one of the reasons I was interested in exercise psychology, because all my friends would be like, oh yeah, I'll go to the gym. And then they never went. Whereas I was there and I was like, where the fuck are you? Like, where are you? So that got me interested in understanding that. But I mean, I didn't know what was happening. I was very much the Instagram, when Instagram was new, And it was the fat, and it was the nothing tastes as good as skinny feels, aspartame will make you fat, all that shit. Like, I was team all of it. So it's been a journey. It's been a very long journey.
That's class. But again, I think it makes you a better coach going through all like the... Because you only learn, like if you get something right the first time, you only learn one thing, you know how to do it. Whereas if you get it wrong, you learn like, that doesn't work, so I need to try something else. Right, that maybe doesn't work, and then when you get it, I think you learn a lot more as a coach. Genuinely, Clara, like I've just jotted down so many notes there for so many things that I want to talk about.
Excellent.
Oh, right. So let's go back to the very start of that story there. You were talking about you are a perfectionist or you're a recovering perfectionist. Where do you feel, or where do you think that came from?
Good question. I think it's always been part of my personality. I've always been pretty, like, I like doing things the right way. I mean, I've always been a really good student. You know, you were saying earlier that you struggled in school and in uni, but like I was top of the class my entire life. Like, I've never known any different. And so what tends to happen, I think, is that when you're a kid that does well in school and you kind of stand out to teachers, they start to expect that from you, and you kind of become known as the person who is smart, the person who always does well, and very quickly you start to integrate that into the person, like into who you are, and without really realizing. And again, it's almost like an unintended consequence, right? Is that you end up almost like trying to constantly ascribe to that, but then there's no ceiling. Like, you can always be better. Like, you can always be better. And I don't know when it became problematic for me, but I've always been, you know, very much like, especially with academic stuff, not so much with other stuff. Like, I'm super messy, but like for my academic shit, like I am on the fucking ball with it. And that's why bodybuilding suited me so well, because it was just like that perfectionism. Wow. Like, it had a space to flourish, but in a way that felt helpful for me at the time anyway. But yeah, so it's been there for as long as I can remember. I mean, my parents are both professional classical musicians, which tells you that I probably inherited a large chunk of my perfectionism from them, because the only way that you can become a professional classical musician is by being a perfectionist. Yeah. So yeah, I think it started really early, and it just sort of festered. And then, you know, when, like I said, when you're expected to be the smart kid in school and everything, you know, people expect you to study medicine, and I thought I wanted to study medicine, and I was, you know, trying to be, and was top of my class consecutively for like as long as I can remember, and that it just ends up taking a toll. I think like that it has to come out some way. You have to rebel somehow, and you know, when you can't control everything in your life, which of course, you know, you can't control shit, you start to control your eating, your exercise, your body shape, whatever that might be. Yeah.
And then that ties in then, like, I wanted to kind of just talk a bit about the disordered eating side of things. And I don't know if, so normally before I jump on this, I ask people if there is stuff that they don't want to talk about. And if you want to message me, I'll keep my phone there if there's anything you don't want to talk about, and we won't. But with regards to disordered eating, when did you start to realize that, like, because obviously you wouldn't have been like, right, this is a problem, so I'm going to do it. It would have been like you started doing it and then you were like, right, this isn't right. And I know that you said it was, you knew you were giving away the wrong image to your, like, the people in front of you. But was there ever a time that you felt like what you were doing, you were like, I shouldn't be doing this because it's not healthy for me? Was there ever a phase like that? Or
yeah, 100%. I think, kind of to backtrack a little bit, I was super obsessed with like addictions and clinical psychology for a really long time. When I was younger, like I would ask my parents, why are people alcoholics, when I was 10? Like, no 10-year-old needs to know that. So I knew what eating disorders were way before I struggled with one. But I have very clear memories of feeling fat from, you know, probably when I was like 11, if not younger. Bearing on, I've never had any issues with my weight in that regard, like never any concerns. But I just remember thinking that I was fat. So body dysmorphia was something that clearly was present in kind of like how my mind viewed myself. And so when I started to struggle with disordered eating, it kind of started in teenage years. There was a lot of girls in my school who were struggling with anorexia, and kind of, you know, you just figured that if you ate less, you lost weight. And that's something that's always been praised in society, and it's kind of something that I just started to do, and I lost weight, and it was kind of fine, and it was okay, and it wasn't dangerous. And then I just went through like a couple of stressful periods in my life, like pretty shitty boyfriend that I had that didn't treat me well at all. Other boyfriends that, when you're 15, it's like your entire life your heart gets broken, and like, what do you do? So I think I started to not necessarily overeat, but I started to make myself, I guess, trigger warning, I am going to be talking about eating disorders quite graphically, but I did start to make myself physically sick when I was about like 16, knowing exactly what I was doing. I was fully aware of what was happening, and I've journaled my whole life. So I've got entries where I was like, I'm starting to scare myself a little bit because I made myself sick today. And so it's very like to the point, very aware of what's going down. And eventually I told my parents, and like, it sort of stopped. But the way that I felt about myself never changed. So inevitably, when I went to uni, it just kind of got worse. But at that point, I wasn't making myself sick. I was just restricting my intake massively during the week. And then it would come to the weekend, and I would just be on full-on binge mode. Like, I would go spend so much money on food and just like eat and then feel disgusting, and then repeat the cycle again come Monday. I'd be like, right, restriction, the exact same meal plan. I was doing intermittent fasting, carb cycling. I was doing it all during the week, and then the weekend came and it was like, poof, no control at all. So, I mean, I was aware of what was happening, but did I want to deal with it? I don't know. I think I was just really scared of gaining weight. But also, more often than not always, but when you are struggling with, typically any kind of disordered eating or eating disorder presentation, it's because there's something going on with emotional regulation that you're just unable to, regulate how you feel. So you turn to food, or you turn to exercise to numb, to feel something, to feel good, to feel pleasurable emotions when you're eating things. So yeah, I don't really know if that answered the question there, but I think I was quite aware of it, but I don't know if I was fully willing to change until I was, in a sense.
Yeah. So how was the transition then from going from like that disordered eating to someone else being in control of what you ate and how much you ate?
It was liberating. I didn't think it would be, but it was so liberating. Because it was no longer like I just gave away the control, and because so much of my thought was consumed with that, it was almost like suddenly I had all this free brain space. And then once I had that free space, and it might not be the same experience for everyone, but once I didn't have to think about, am I gaining too much weight or not? What am I going to eat? How much of it am I going to eat? What am I going to do? When am I going to train? What am I going to do in the gym? Once I didn't have to deal with any of that shit, I could then go, okay, what the fuck's going on? Like, how am I feeling? Why is this showing up? What's going on here? And it just provided me the headspace, quite physically and kind of metaphorically, to actually, think about those things and work on the emotional regulation piece that was missing before. And it was, don't get me wrong, it was fucking scary. It was really, really scary, because one was like, oh, we're going to go and do a gaining phase. And I was like, are you crazy? Are you fucking crazy? But we did it, right? And he was like, yeah, you're going to eat nearly 2,000 calories. And I'm going, oh my God, you're mental. Because all I'd ever known was restriction and unhinged binging. There was no in between. And to think, I'm actually going to track 2,000 calories, like it felt wild. But, I trusted Vaughan. He had a good reputation. And I felt like, I don't know, I was like, yeah, well, let's just go. And yeah, I think part of being perfectionistic is that you're very determined, and so I don't do things by halves. If someone tells me what to do, like I will do it like to the T, and I always go, full all out essentially in something, and so this wasn't going to be any different. And it paid off, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I would really like that to transition to the next thing that I want you to talk about. I want you to talk about, so for the general population, people, when we're talking about gaining phases, this is bulking, improvement, pushing up. Like, there's a bunch of names in the industry. There's it means you're trying to gain muscle, but you will in turn gain body fat. We've spoke about it a little bit in other podcasts. But if you do have questions, you can ask down below. So from 5 years ago, I think your journey is unbelievable. I genuinely do, and I think I've watched a lot of it because I followed Vaughn since he was swinging kettlebells and stuff. So yeah, I have watched it all. And I would love it for you to explain what, after pushing up, you done a photo shoot for going to Loughborough. What then was it that was because I'm kind of similar to you. In fact, we're both very similar in the sense of your whole backstory to where you are now. And I had no intentions of doing bodybuilding. None whatsoever.
Yeah, same.
But I want to hear. So let's talk about that then. So you kind of so you went into a gain phase, start with Vaughn, coming from disordered eating, which is crazy, and I love the contrast in this story, and I really do hope that someone that is listening, that maybe is in this cycle and they feel stuck, that they can see that there are people that you can speak to. And Clara, I'd 100% recommend you speak to Clara. There is Break Binge Eating, the Instagram account. You can reach out to them. There's people. So if you are someone out there, please understand and see. You can get out of that cycle. So Clara, if you could talk through so we know the disordered eating part. The next part was gaining, and then where you're at right now with regards bodybuilding.
Yeah. So, okay. So we did a 12-week gaining phase before starting a photo shoot prep. And the prep was going to be 18 weeks. And I just said, I just want to be in the best shape of my life. I didn't really know what that was because I'd never really taken myself there because I didn't have the knowledge or the coaching or anything. And so we started the prep and, I was enjoying it as much as you enjoy a prep. It was the first time kind of really doing a structured calorie deficit in that way with no binges in between. One of the things that I implemented while I was prepping was things like mindful eating. So I kind of came across this concept and it blew my mind. And so I started to really practice when I was having my, especially sweet treats. Like if I was having a square of dark chocolate, I would do the thing where you sit and it takes you 10 minutes to eat one square of dark chocolate and you eat it mindfully. And it was grueling. It was so annoying. But I did it because I was like, no, this kind of, I can see where this is going. If I can eat a chocolate, which used to be a massive trigger food, if I can eat one square and be fine, wow, that's revolutionary. So anyway, went ahead with the photo shoot prep. And I want to say I was maybe 9 weeks out from the photo shoot, and Vaughn had kind of asked me before, have you thought about competing? And I was like, competing in what? I don't even know what you're talking about here. And he kind of was like, bodybuilding, and I was like, oh, right. And as you do, when you get into something, you start following people on Instagram, and I started following Phoebe Hagen. I started following just other people who are now IFBB pros and the likes of it. And I was like, all right, okay. And because I've got a history in dance, the idea of being on a stage, kind of doing a show, performance, I was like, I can kind of get into that. Yeah, it's crazy. The tan, I don't understand, but I can see it. And honestly, I was 9 weeks out from a photo shoot. I was in the gym. I was in between teaching classes. And I was just looking at bodybuilding shows. I knew about one federation, PCA, looked it up, and there was a show 3 weeks after my photo shoot. And I was like, fuck it. So I just booked it. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that I had to pay to get a bikini. I didn't know how much bikinis cost. I didn't know I had to get shoes, learn how to pose, book tan, makeup. Oh my God. It was, it was a steep learning curve, but I just signed up because it sounded cool, and I thought, fuck it, I'll be lean anyway. What's another 3 weeks? Well, let me tell you, 3 weeks when you're shredded is a pain in the ass. It was grueling, but I did it. I stepped on stage for the first time. I was clueless. Didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how to pose. I kind of knew what the poses looked like, but I didn't know how to pose. But I came off stage and it was just the best time ever. I had the best day of my life. I was so buzzing, and I was like, I want to do that again. Yes, 100%. I want to eat now, but I'm pretty sure I phoned when I was already eating chocolate. I was like, let's do that again next year. But for now, I'm done. I'm done dieting. And so we did. And so, I went into an off season kind of reversed that and went into an off season as I moved to Loughborough. And while I was there, you know, being a master's student in Loughborough, all my friends were, you know, sports nutrition masters, sports physiology masters. Me, like, everyone was kind of in the same sort of like world, and it was awesome. So I would go to the gym first thing in the morning. I'd get my workouts done. I was on the money with my meals, with everything. And I prepped again the following year, and this time did 3 shows, and you know, I did quite well.
No, go on.
Became,
go on. You didn't just quite do well. Tell us.
Right. Well, I placed first and third in a regional, and then third in the British finals for UK Ultimate Physiques, which got me my UK Ultimate Physiques Pro card, which was crazy. It was so cool. And then at the end of that season, so this is 2019 October, that had been a 24-week prep, and you know, Vaughan and I were like, right, well, we'll prep again 2021, and this time we'll go for a British title. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess. Like, all right then. And so that was kind of the mission. So again, kind of reverse dieted, went into the new year, super excited, was like making all this progress, and then fucking lockdown happened, and that was a nightmare. That was so shit. It was so shit. But managed to get kit, managed to train through it, managed to push through. And then it came to 2021, and I started prep in the July of that year, intending to do a long season. I had planned 6 shows and 1 photo shoot, and I did all of it. I saw it right through till the end, and yeah, that's kind of where I finished it. So I competed with WMBF, which is a show that we coincided at, because I am a natural athlete. And then I did a PCA show, and then I competed with 2 bros in the Natural Federation, and I came first in my category at the British finals. So I got my British title, which was really cool. And yeah, then kind of finished prep in December 2021, and then went into last year with completely different goals, really focused on kind of focusing on my health again. And that's been a whole kind of journey in itself. So I guess that's a bodybuilding piece in there, kind of summarized quite briefly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and we're going to touch on your recent journey as well.
Nice.
Because I'm fascinated, because my partner is kind of going through the same thing. And it is wild. It is just so wild. But this is something like me and Justine spoke about, and I think everybody that has done some sort of prep, we've all spoke about. And then the fact that you've already touched on like having like mild disordered eating before. How did you rebound out of like your first shoot, first show, after like long preps?
It wasn't as bad as I thought. In fact, I think the worst, quote unquote, psychologically speaking, the worst rebound was from my most recent prep, kind of 2021. Because my 2 previous preps, I was able to pretty much just sort of keep going. So I, you know, had a few days off tracking. But then, you know, because I'd been practicing mindful eating and mindfulness, and sort of I was quite aware of how I felt, and I was very much in the routine and regiment, and I just kind of, I was able to reverse properly. So, you know, keep going to the gym, keep doing my cardio, keep doing all those things, and sort of like transition into it. So don't get me wrong, it's weird. Like, you know, you're always a bit scared of gaining weight. It feels quite uncomfortable. It feels, the body dysmorphia from being really lean to, like, from being shredded to being lean is fucking crazy. Like, it's really wild, because you genuinely feel like you look like a whale and you feel like a whale, but you don't at all. But it's just the way that your body feels, because think about it, you've been ignoring your needs for so long, you've been hungry for so long because you've been in a deficit. To suddenly feel full is like, what? You know, it's been 6 months since you had that feeling, so it's really weird. But it didn't really, like, I wouldn't say necessarily affected me lots, or not that much. And because I always knew that I had another cut, or I had a mini cut, or like a recomp, or like my next show, whatever coming up, it was always like, oh, you know, I'll gain weight, I'll lose it again, that's fine. Whereas in 2021, I finished prep on, my last show was the 18th of December, went to my parents after that for Christmas, and so essentially I finished prep the week leading into Christmas, which was awful. Like, it was such a bad idea. It was really horrible. It was not a good time at all. I felt so uncomfortable in my body. I felt so bloated, so watery. It wasn't so much like the kind of uncontrollable eating. Like that was kind of something that I was no longer finding that difficult. It was more just the fact that I wasn't training as much. I had like a big psychology deadline. I wasn't doing cardio, whereas every other reverse, I have done cardio, I've like reversed out. And this time I didn't. And for like, I had like 3 weeks of inconsistency because I was at my parents' and then it was New Year's and then we went away on holiday for a week. And so it wasn't really until 3 weeks after that I was getting back into the gym. And by that point, I hadn't gained that much weight realistically. But in my head, I was just not in a good spot. And I was really nervous because I got married last year. And one of my main goals was that I didn't want to have to diet really hard for my wedding. I just didn't want to have to fucking put weight on and pull it back off because I just couldn't be asked. But I had gained weight quicker than what I thought I needed to. And I was just so hungry and so exhausted that I kept gaining weight, went past what I wanted. And then kind of everything sort of came a bit to a head and around like May time where I had a bit of a not mental health breakdown. I would say that's an exaggeration, but I had quite a lull in my mental health where I just said, fuck this shit, fuck this. I'm not drinking. I'm not doing anything for a month. I can't be out. I just don't want to do any of it. Reduce my training load. And then kind of started dieting for my wedding. Lol. In that headspace, but I felt kind of ready for it. But after that, I was like, I need a break. I need a break from all of this. I need to step away. I need to really assess how I'm feeling, assess and kind of come at bodybuilding from a completely different perspective. And it's not to shit and poo-poo on bodybuilding because I love it. And it was so helpful for me in so many ways for such a long period of my life. But it came to a point where it was no longer helpful. It was becoming a bit more like that disordered eating and disordered kind of perception of my body tendencies. They were starting to feed on it again. And that was my time to go, fuck this. And it's interesting because I remember when I first started working with M.a.N, I made him aware of my history. And I said, if at any point in this prep, I start to feel like that's getting triggered again, we're done. I'm not prepping. I don't want to do it. And it never happened because I was super aware. I was like going through it. But like, I think I just had so many other stresses this year, or last year, should I say, that it came to that point and I was like, nah, I'm done. I need a break from all of this. And I guess that's kind of where I'm at now. Like I still, but it's not to shit on bodybuilding because it's not bodybuilding. It's everything else. And it's being very, very aware of yourself and your own needs. That can sometimes just like highlight those issues.
Yeah, 100%. So for people that are listening, when you rebound, as we kept saying there, and there was a couple other terms thrown in, rebound just means that you're coming away from fat loss or dieting. There's different approaches. You can reverse out of it, which means, so you're in a calorie deficit and you got down to like, 900 calories or something? Like something you have been down there? Or?
Yeah. I was, again, trigger warning for the listeners, but on a non-training day, I think the lowest my calories have been like 840 and on a training day, 960, 940 on like, an hour plus of cardio, 18,000 steps.
Yeah.
But I am natural, and sometimes when you're natural, you can't just put PEDs in there to help you with the fat loss. So
yeah, I'm going to definitely come and circle back around to this because there's a few things that I want to talk about, like the category that you compete in, and then like females' perceptions of potentially bodybuilding, and then what they want to. I'm going to come back around to that. So yeah. Clara cannot survive on 800 calories. Nobody can. Like genuinely, anybody that is eating that thinking that they're all right, like you need to speak to someone probably. But what you're wanting to do when you reverse out, you would be just gradually increasing the amount of calories that you eat so that your body doesn't just like hold on to or like turn that extra food into fat. Because when your body has been in like this starved state, because it is a controlled starvation, your body actually starts to create more fat cells, so it's easier for it to store fat when you start feeding it enough. And then the fat cells also get like themselves ready to store fat. It's like a defense mechanism, people could say, I suppose. So some people like to take this like step-in approach out so that they don't gain too much fat too quick. And that's called reverse dieting. And then you also get called recovery diet, which you then go from whatever your deficit is to your maintenance. And it's just to try and get body fat on. And I know that like everybody that I've ever spoke to after a photo shoot or after a competition, they're always like, what's the point in getting to that and looking that good and then undoing it? Like, you still do look like good for a long time, but your perception of what good shape is completely changes once you've been ripped. And
Oh, honestly, I always say that, like, once you've been stage shredded, like, your perception of what lean is skewed for the rest of your life. Like, it
yeah,
doesn't matter. You're like, unless you're stage shredded, you're not gonna feel lean, which is bizarre.
completely, and I completely agree with you. But the thing, like, yeah, like the thing is, like, for people that are maybe listening, being like, I don't really understand the difference between like shredded and good shape, and in the kind of line. However, there is like detriment to your health being stage lean, and that's why you have to like. A lot of client, like I've done a client recently on a photo shoot, and he got ridiculously lean, and I was like, look, our goal is to try and get some body fat back on you so you can be a human again. Because just now you are an exercise robot. You don't do much else. Like, your body's not prepared to do much else.
Yeah.
And that's what we were talking about there. Do you think that is you kind of stepping away from bodybuilding now then, or?
I mean, never say never, but it's taken me, I guess we'll speak about this, but it's taken me a year to get my period back, pretty much, since I finished competing. And I just don't know if I'm willing to put myself through that again. I would like to start a family in the future, like not anytime soon. And also one of the things that when I had that mental health kind of blip, let's call it, in May, I started going to therapy, which was like long overdue anyway. But I started going to therapy because I felt like I wasn't meeting my own needs, like I wasn't listening to what I needed in so many other ways. And through that kind of exploration, it sort of made me realize that, in essence, to succeed as a competitive bodybuilder, to make it to stage looking lean, you need to be very, very, very good at ignoring your needs. And that's fine if it serves that purpose, but it was kind of, I was ignoring my needs and I didn't have to be ignoring my needs. And so I just don't know if I'm willing to ignore my needs again, essentially, to be able to do that. I mean, never say never. This is the thing, like, I love bodybuilding. I love the discipline that it allows you to develop. I love how it enables you to really push yourself and see, I don't say what you're made of, because that sounds really American and corny, but you know, realistically, the way I've always read is that I've always had such a privileged and lucky life. Like, I've not had any stress in my life, you know, other than self-induced. Like, I've had a cushy life. Nothing been difficult. And I'm so lucky to be able to say that. But it means that I've never had to see how resilient I am. I've never had to see, you know, how do I respond in challenging situations. And bodybuilding seemed to be an avenue in something that I'm already interested in that allowed me to explore that and to push those boundaries and to see, you know, what tools do I lean on when I have been fasting all morning to push my first meal back. I'm on fuck all food and I need to do an hour of cardio, and it's outside, it's fucking freezing, and all I want to do is curl up into a ball and eat chocolate. Like, what do I do to actually get myself onto the cross trainer, smash the hour of cardio, and be consistent for the whole day? Like, you know, and so I love that bodybuilding enabled me to see that is in me, and I love that it enables other competitors, other clients to see that too. But, you know, it requires you to ignore a lot of things. And yeah, I just don't know if, never say never. I just don't know if anytime soon, I don't think I'll be competing anytime soon. That's for sure.
Okay. So so everybody that's listening just now, I want you to pause this, and I want you to go look up Clara's Instagram account. I will link it down below, so you don't even have to go look it up, right? And I think when people think about, if they're watching now, they'll see that you are not this, like, massively muscle-bound, masculine-looking female. Like, they'll see that, and I genuinely feel like the category that you compete in is what a lot of women, and maybe I'm not allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of women's perceptions of what they kind of want to look like now is so skew-iffed because of the access to the internet, and like now what used to be good it's like mediocre because we're now seeing the outliers and the unbelievable people. And I want like people to realize that like getting what people think is toned is a lot leaner than what people actually think it is. Because we just said there, you lost your menstrual cycle for a year. You were down to like 840 calories on non-training days. You were having to do cardio. And like when women, like honestly, when you see Clara's physique, you probably think, that's what I wish I looked like. But you're going to then have to think about what that takes. Mm-hmm. And like we were saying there about like our perception of being in good shape, it completely warps your own perception of like how you look in the mirror forever. But I also think that like women have this idea that it's, I don't know if they think it's easier for them to get toned and men are just going to get muscly. I don't know. And I wanted to get that on this podcast at some point. Like, Clara, I really hope that doesn't feel like I'm taking anything from your... Like,
no, not at all.
You look... Like, I genuinely feel like majority of women want to look like the way you look when you're on stage. And that's... Yeah. And I want that to be... Like, that is my point. But you need to understand the effort and work that goes into that. And I guess to blow a bit of smoke up your own bum as well, Clara, at the WNBF, when you walked, like, I didn't even know you were there. And when you walked on stage, I remember being like, my girlfriend as well, she was unbelievable at, like, she didn't really care about it either. But she kind of got into the shows and she would be like, they're going to win, they're going to win, they're going to win, they're going to win. And she was right, like, every time. And as soon as you walked out, we were both like, she's won. And then I was like, I'm sure that, and I was like to Lisa, I was like, I'm sure that's Clara that works with Vaughn. And then you came out and I was like, no, that definitely is. But you looked unbelievable. Genuinely unbelievable. And I want that to kind of I don't want that to come across as like, I know what women want. I really don't want it to be like that. And I also don't want it to be that I'm like blowing smoke up your bum and like, but I do kind of want to because I think you need to know that like, you looked unbelievable.
Thank you. I do agree though. Like I think a lot of people don't realize what because the bikini, it's called bikini. The category I've competed in bikini, and like that when it started, they needed a category that was less muscular and more beach body like, and that's not a beach body. Like that's mental. Like it's not just that's not a quick diet. It's really really hard and it's so unsustainable. And I think that's the issue is that. Again, a lot of people look up to professionals who stay lean year round, and when you look like that, you get so much praise for it because as a society we equate looking good and being lean with being a good person and having all these other positive attributes. But I don't think people get to fully appreciate what it takes to be in that position, and it's awesome. And I don't regret competing as a bodybuilder at all. But there's always a catch. It's great, but your entire life is fucking consumed by training, eating, cardio, steps. You run your life like a military operation. There's literally no flexibility as you get closer to show day or to your competition. There's literally no flexibility. Well, there's very little flexibility in terms of how you live your life. And, that's not, it doesn't, in the long term, it doesn't make a lot of people feel happy. And unless you're a professional and getting paid for it, which, I'm not, most of us aren't, it's just, it's just not worth it. It's more worthwhile learning how to, love yourself and care for yourself. And it sounds so cheesy, but it's more worthwhile doing that and being okay with however the fuck you look than trying to attain that physique. Putting your body, putting your mind, putting everyone around you through that, for what? It's not even sustainable. Like, if it's a dream body, it shouldn't be a nightmare to get there. And trust me, it's prep can feel like a bit of a nightmare at times. You choose it, and it's entirely your choice, and you can stop whenever. But there are times where you go, why am I doing this again? Like, what is the point of this crap?
I'm definitely stealing that quote. It's a nightmare to get a dream body.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's not mine. I saw it. I think I read it somewhere. So, but I don't know who to credit for it. So,
I guess like one of the fortunate. I'm going to talk a bit about me here. Like the fortunate thing for me is I don't give a shit about the way I look now, and I think it's because I've been ripped, and I've been like 95 kilos pushing my weight up, and like I was like overweight. And now it's like, and I done a full post on this, like the difference between being ripped and the difference between like being heavier. It genuinely is just like, now it's just a number on the scale. Like what I see in the mirror is just me all the time. I enjoy the process, like you were talking there. Like I find it very spiritual. Like I think you learn so much about yourself, and that's my favorite part of it. Like when it gets hard, like what are you saying to yourself? Like, are you trying to find excuses? Are you trying to find like buyouts, or are you like taking it head on? And I'm a total wimp when it comes to this stuff. Like I'm lazy. I am a total wimp. I don't really like working hard. Like I don't like any of that stuff. So for me, when I'm doing it, it's like, here comes Thomas. Thomas is trying to talk you out of it, and then I'm like, no, come on, do it. And that's the side of it that I do really like.
Yeah, and it's so fulfilling, and it's so cool to know that you can put yourself through something like that. That you do have, what it takes to step on stage, and no disrespect to people who don't make it, but it's so hard. Like most people don't make. Not everyone who starts prep finishes prep, and like because it's hard, and there's something about the ego that comes with that that's really satisfying. Like I remember there'd be times where I'd be on the Stairmaster, fucking not sprinting up that thing, but no hands, straight on, 45 minutes, let's get this shit done, total focus. And there'd be someone that came onto the Stairmaster next to me, so much slower, holding on. They'd come up after 10 minutes, and in my head I was competing with them, and I'd be like, weak, like you're weak, I'm strong, like fuck you, I'm gonna keep going. It didn't really matter, but it's kind of what helped me. And there is an ego about knowing that you can do that, knowing that you can take yourself there, and knowing that you can do what many people don't want to, and what many people can't. and for the good or for the worse, for the better, for the worse, but there's definitely something that comes with it for sure.
Oh, that's another one of my favorite things. Like just now, I'm going into like a 2-year gaining phase. And even speaking to like people that compete, when I tell them I'm doing that, they're like, 2 years? Oof, I don't know if I could do that. And I'm like, well, that's why I'm doing it. Because I want to do stuff that people, like when I tell people like, this is what I've done, they're like, holy shit, I couldn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, you couldn't.
Yeah.
Like,
the delayed gratification of it is like amazing.
Yeah. I think it's such a weird, and like, I guess like if you were to take everything that we're pretty much everything that we're talking about out of the bodybuilding context, it is insane. Like it is unhealthy, but you're going to keep doing it. It's
100%. But at the same time, like how much, I don't know, I feel like there's so many things that bodybuilding has taught me that I've implemented into other aspects of my life that have enabled me to succeed in my career. For example, like when you're in prep, you have to have structured time for when am I getting my steps done, when am I training, when am I doing my cardio, when am I eating, and like implementing that to day-to-day life enables me to have a much more, I don't know, fluid day, like planning my breaks, planning when am I doing this, get more shit done, and not procrastinate as much. So I'm a perfectionist, I would have probably figured it out without bodybuilding, but it's knowing when it's been a long day and I'm like, oh, can't be bothered, but I'm like, but I can do it. So what's your excuse? Sometimes I'm like, well, I need to get this shit done, so let's do it, come on.
yeah oh, totally. Clara, honestly, there's so many things I want to still keep talking about, but I've just realised that we're coming up for an hour and I don't want to keep you too late. And also
I've got time, but it says the length of the podcast depends on that.
Oh, well, people will listen, like, honestly, everything you've spoke about, people are interested in. There's so many things I do want to keep talking about. But Vaughn will kill me if I keep staying up this late. But, right, there's a couple things that, like, I would like to just touch on. Mm-hmm. Because we've gone into the new year, you spoke there about, like, something that you really liked and it really drew you into, like, the psychology of exercise was, like, you're finding your friends kind of, like, falling off the wagon and, like, they weren't able to keep being consistent. Is there like, information that you could kind of give us about that and then give us maybe some, like, recommendations and guidance on how to, like, not fall off the wagon?
Let me think of the best way to translate this. I think one of the... It's a bit cliche, but I'll kind of elaborate a little bit. One of the main reasons that people tend to fail and fall off the bandwagon with their fitness goals is because they don't really have a strong enough why. And it's not just like something esoteric or something like, oh, because I want to be in the best shape of my life. Like, that's just a bit naff. Like, not naff, but it's not enough. It's not got enough like sustenance to it to actually make us do the thing that we want to be doing in the long term. And so one of the things that I learned during my masters that I use all the time with my clients is making sure that when we set goals, that those goals are motivated by values. So when we think about values, they're the why, why are we doing something? But values function more a bit like a compass. And I use this analogy all the time. So if you're following a compass and if you choose to walk east, you never actually get east. You just walk in that direction. And in that direction just happen to be certain landmarks, certain places, certain towns, whatever that might be, right? And so the same thing goes for our values. When we have a value, we never achieve the value itself. We never arrive at the value. So an example of value that I've got is like personal growth and development. So it doesn't matter what I do. I'm never going to get to personal development and growth. But as I think about what's going to help me get there, I'll develop goals that are aligned with that value, which might be, complete whatever qualification, read X amount of books, challenge myself in this specific way. So when it comes to setting goals, as well as making the goal specific, it's thinking about what value is the pull, like what value is in the direction that you want to go in. Like, what do you want to do? And where do those goals fit in? So the goals are just the pinpoints in there, but the value reminds us that it's about the process, because otherwise we get to the goal and the goalpost moves and then we're dissatisfied and we're not enjoying it and we're just thinking about that end point. Whereas if it's informed and motivated by a value, another value might be honesty and integrity, which sounds a bit more, how does that relate to fitness? But if honesty is important to you and you keep lying to yourself about how consistent you are, what you're eating, when you're going to go to the gym and then not going, about those types of things, it's just mismatched. And so if honesty is something that you have acknowledged that's really important to you, when it comes to slacking off and when it comes to those moments where you go, do I patch the gym or do I show up? You're like, well, it's really important that I'm honest with myself. So why do I want to make up these excuses? Am I making these excuses because I can't be asked, because I'm slipping into my old ways? Or, if I'm motivated by honesty, can I just be honest with myself and tell myself to get a fucking grip and just go to the gym, for example, right? So when it comes to goal setting, one of the best things that people can do to help them, set better goals is to identify what values they have. If you just Google like value sort, I can send you a link if you want to put it in the show notes that I use all the time with my clients. There's lists of values. What I tend to say to my clients is narrow it down to your top 10, and then from your top 10 pick your top 4. And when it comes to those, think about what types of goals align with those values. They don't just have to be fitness and health and whatever informed, but if that's kind of what we're talking about, then that can be what it is. And think about what goals relate to your specific values, and then it doesn't become so much about the goal. It becomes about living in alignment with who you really are, because values are kind of our values. It's who we are. It's what we believe. It's what fundamentally makes us. And there's nothing worse than, there are lots of things worse, but it feels awful to not live in congruence with your values. So if you know what your values are and you set goals that are aligned with the values, you're much less likely to fall off the bandwagon, because the values matter more than the discomfort that is required to get the thing done that's going to bring you closer towards the value. So I think that would be my main tip, I guess. Yeah. I hope that's practical and applied enough and not too out there.
No, definitely. Like that, it reminds me of is it the Nietzsche? His quote, it's like, every man that knows his why can suffer anyhow, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly that.
Yeah. Now, let's keep talking, because I'm interested. Honestly, there's so many things I want to talk about. So I think that's a bit of advice for everybody, that like, you need to find out why you want to lose a bit of weight, why you want to like build a bit of muscle. Like, you need to find out why, and then why it's important to you. It's not just, and I actually just done a post this morning about it, about like people are crap at goal setting because they'll say something that doesn't excite them. It's very wishy-washy. There's like no real, like you're saying, go east. Like, if we're going east, we're going east. You can't go northeast. You have to go east.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that clarity. And I also think as well, there's a huge, like you touched on it there, that like, I think, and this is just a kind of like makey up theory thing, that a lot of people nowadays do have these like issues with their well-being because they aren't being honest with themselves. Social media shows you a way that you're supposed to live, but there's people that don't want to live that way.
Yeah.
They want to do other things, but because everybody's doing it, everybody wants to be part of a tribe and as a group, they're trying to fit in. But I think, like, yeah, I think that's a value that probably a lot of people do have, honesty to themselves, but they just never realise. I'm from a small town, and a lot of young lads are killing themselves, and I think it's because they're getting told that, like, drop out of school, go get an apprenticeship, go get a trade, like, and they maybe don't want to do that. And I think it's, and like, honestly, like that is like 90% of what young men in this town do is go do that. And then there's not very many that like, I want to go follow my dreams, I want to chase this, and I want to do that. And I think that is a big cause for not feeling good just now.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, think about it. If your life can feel really meaningless when you don't feel like you're doing anything that brings you joy, or you don't really see the point in, there's not really an end to it, and you just think, fuck me, is this going to be me for the rest of my life? Same fucking routine, day in, day out. It's despairing for anyone. It's really important to find meaning in what we do, or to find, not maybe in what we do as work, but to find ways in which we can assert our own autonomy and our own individuality and our own kind of selves into it. And it can be whatever. That's why fitness is so amazing for so many people, because they've got their jobs and they do their jobs and it pays the bills. But, fitness then provides them with the space to explore something completely different, something that's a lot more perhaps fulfilling for them. And that's really, really cool. So, yeah, I agree. It's important to have, just a way of asserting our autonomy and a way of doing something that's important to us. But this is the thing, we're so distracted all the time, and we're just in a rush to get somewhere, but we don't really know where the fuck we're going. Like, it's like people are playing this game, but like we don't know what game it is. Like, we don't know what's happening. We're just kind of the hamster wheel, and it's never ending. And when we're too distracted, we're not paying attention to how we feel, and when we don't pay attention to how we feel, things feel sudden. It's like, oh my god, I'm depressed. Oh, where did that come from? Well, funnily fucking enough, had you paused for a minute, it makes sense. It's not just sudden. You don't just catch depression like you catch a cold. It's just completely different. But when we're unaware, when we're kind of just going through life, we're just not paying attention to these things. And of course there's going to be distress. Of course. How would there not be distress?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, I hate when people say, like, oh, just put it to the back of your mind. Because I think if you don't actually, like if you don't actually sort the issue and you just leave it there, it's still there. Like, that's the way I kind of think about it. Like, I think, like, when people say, like, people will say, oh, I want to do that, and then they never try. I think the fact that they've verbalized that and said it, that their brain holds it, and then because they're never doing it, it's like that niggle, like, when the dishes are needing done and you've not done them, but you know they need done, and you're like, oh, and then they start getting gross, and then they just get worse, and then they get worse again, and then you get freaking rats. Like, I think that's what happens in your brain when you start, like, well, not being honest with yourself, and then just putting things in your back of mind. But that's, like, I said this to you before, like, nothing has to be scientifically correct. These are just...
No, but it is correct, because it fulfills itself. Think about it. If we have an idea and we... imagine someone's got this idea that they're a failure, or they've just not got a very high self-esteem, but they have this amazing idea, but they never pursue it because they think they're a failure, but then they never pursue it, and so that reinforces the idea that they're a failure. So then they're a failure from the offset, and then they're a failure for not pursuing the idea, and so then they're a double failure, and then they're a double failure, so they're even more failure, so they go for less things. And it's a very, like, it's an unintended consequence of keeping ourselves safe, because if you're a failure, you don't want to take risks in case you fail, right? But when you don't take risks because you might fail, then that has the unintended consequence of letting your brain know that you are in fact a failure because you didn't even try. And then you figure out that, well, I must be a failure, and so if I'm definitely a failure, I'm definitely not going to try ever again, and that keeps going, and it's just an unintended consequence. But yeah, it's such a shame, and it's so hard to come unstuck from that. Not impossible, but just it's really hard, and people just don't have the tools. We're not really, it's not really something that we're taught, is it? You know, this is how you become unstuck.
So yeah, so people, if you're listening to this and you're thinking that you want to do some and make some changes this year, just fucking try. And then what you need to do is you need to find your values and your why to why you want to change, and you need to keep just going in that direction, and you're just going to feel better. It's, I guess going all the way back to like you and I, like we both went through the same thing. Like once we got coaching, there was just like this ultimate clarity. And I think it was, for me, it was like sharing my goal with someone else, them being like, yeah, I think you could achieve that. Me being like, whoa, what? And then them saying like, this is how we'll do it. And you just get clear instruction on how to do it. And then you're like, right, okay, I trust, I'm just going to do it. And I guess that ties in as well. Like we're both coaches. We've both got coaches. We've got the same coach. I think if you're a coach and you don't have a coach, you have no justification for telling someone else that they should be getting coached. Because if you don't like coaching enough to get it yourself, how can you ask someone else to get it?
Definitely. And I think having a coach helps you understand the demands or the things that you're asking your clients to do, because we ask our clients to do a lot of things. Like, it's a big change for a lot of people. It doesn't matter how experienced they are. When they start working with a coach, that's a lot of trust that they need to put in someone else, and the changes that we ask them to make are huge. And if we've never experienced that ourselves, it's really hard to relate. It's really hard to be patient. It's hard to be compassionate. It's hard to be understanding. Whereas if we've been there and we know what it's like to relinquish that control, if we know what it's like to be accountable to someone else, even though you don't want to, and even though you've had a bad week, you know, when you've had that first-hand experience, you're like, all right, okay, I understand. And you can almost anticipate it in clients and go, here, this is perfectly normal. I've done it too. It's fine. And they go, oh, thank goodness they're human.
Yeah.
You know, we can talk about it, you know.
Yeah, totally. I think coaching is such a, and I spoke with someone, she was a client, she's a lawyer, and I think she's like really, really high up in like law. And I remember she like, when I told her I had a coach, she like bought into my coaching even more, because she was convinced everyone should have mentors, coaches for the rest of your life.
Completely. Yeah,
And I totally agree with that. I do totally agree with that. Right, Clara, I'm going to start going off on all sorts of tangents. I'm going to ask two more questions. One, what is your actual name? Is it Clarita?
Clara. My first name is Clara. Yeah. But because I grew up in Spain, Clarita is like an endearing way to say Clara. So it's what my friends would call me, Clarita. So it just used to be my Instagram handle before, but my name is Clara.
Okay, because I asked Vaughn once, and I was like, Vaughn, you better not be calling her Clara, and that's not her name. And you just can't pronounce it. And he was like, no, I think it is. Right, and then I end with... I feel like an idiot now. So I finished this podcast with the same question for everybody, because the podcast is called M.a.N, Muscles and Nonsense, and I did always want it to have like a bit of a masculine spin on it, and I want it to be a place that men can come and women can come and they can learn more about men, because I do feel, and again, maybe I don't have the place to say this, there are good men out there. Like I truly believe there are. I believe I was brought up as like a gentleman, but nowadays that can be looked upon as like, well, I can do it myself, and it's a weird space. And I end every podcast. Don't worry, it's not going to be too controversial. It's not going to be a controversial. What do you think, Clara, it takes to be a good man?
Ooh, that's such a good question. What does it take to be a good man? I think it takes self-awareness. I'm going to say self-awareness and vulnerability, but that's a very female response. But what I mean by that is that I think that to be a good man or a good person generally, unless you're self-aware, it's really, really hard to know how to integrate into the world. When we're aware of ourselves, We're aware of how we make other people feel. We're aware of how other people make us feel. And we're aware of the influence that we have, not just in the people local to us, but in the broader world. And that's really important, because that then allows us to make decisions about how we want to live our lives. Without awareness, we're fucked. So self-aware. And vulnerability, what I mean by that is the willingness to be open about our inner experiences. And I guess that does relate a bit more to men specifically, which kind of, due to society, often don't feel like they're able to express their emotions. They're not able to express their thoughts as honestly and as frankly as they might want to. They might feel like they have to keep them hidden away, and that they're going to be viewed as less than if they display any kind of emotion other than anger and frustration, maybe. So I think that being vulnerable with themselves and kind of with other people is what makes men and humans generally, but men better, because it's so much stronger. When you are vulnerable, it's like basically the antidote to shame. And when we're ashamed, we hide. We do all sorts of things to reduce the shame, to numb the shame, whether that be drugs, whatever. But that's just one example that comes to mind that often shows up with men. So yeah, I think self-awareness and vulnerability, probably.
Brilliant. And it's every time I ask that, I get different answers. And this is something that, and I put this in the introduction, I am obsessed with how to live a good life and how to be a good man. And that was the big reason behind why I made this podcast. Clara, honestly, I'm going to need to get you to come on. And I actually think when we come off recording, I'm going to try and book you in again in a couple of weeks, because I didn't even get to ask you one of the questions that we'd spoke about on Instagram. We didn't even really get to talk about sports psychology, and I am massively fascinated by that. As you said, I am also obsessed with obesity, so I would love to get you on and talk about that.
Nice.
And like I say, that I didn't even ask any of the questions. We just spoke about a bunch of things, and I've absolutely loved it. Genuinely loved it.
Okay, I'm so glad about that. Part 2 incoming then.
Yeah. So honestly, Clara, thanks so much. I'm gonna put everything down below. Your Instagram, how to get in touch with you for coaching. If you can, send a link for the values.
Yes, I will do.
Thing that you suggested. I'll put it all down below. But honestly, so lovely just chatting with you. Honestly, so lovely. And we will get you on again soon. If anybody doesn't have any questions as well below, just leave them down below. Clara, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.